Make your voice rough, like you smoke cigarettes.
You are not the beef. That was awful. You are not the beef.
My name is Forrester. I practice dentistry in the nation, also veterinary arts and medicine on those humans that will sit still for it.
You have your work cut out for you there.
Traded for him with an Indian who said he came by him honestly. I gave up 2 dental mirrors and a bottle of expectorant. Do either of you need medical attention?
No. It is fixing to get cold. Do you know of any better place to take shelter?
I have my bearskin. You might want to head to the original Greaser Bob's. He notched a dugout into the hollow along the Carillion River. If you ride the river, you won't fail to see it. Greaser Bob, the original Greaser Bob, is hunting north of the picket wire and would not begrudge its use. And scene. Hello, and welcome to The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. I am Phil Rood, and I'm the dad.
And I'm Austin Rood. I'm the son. Every week we watch a movie, and then we get on mic to talk about it.
That's right, we do. What have you been watching this week, Aus?
Mostly The Umbrella Academy.
Umbrella Academy Season
2.
2 just dropped.
Yep, it just came out.
What do you think so far?
It's pretty good. I look at it.
Unenthusiastic.
I don't want to be like, okay, I kind of like it, but I also recognize that it's not necessarily the best show. It's just, It's superhero, fast food. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little like, and I haven't seen season 2, the season 1, and even the original comics. It's almost like the X-Men, but trying to take itself serious, like more seriously.
Yeah.
Like in the way like Watchmen took superheroes and are like, this is what they'd really be like, all messed up. And they're sort of doing the same thing. I enjoy the Umbrella Academy comics a lot. Like, it's one of my favorite series.
Yeah, so you think the show just doesn't live up to it as much?
The show falls short for me. I haven't seen season 2 yet. I enjoyed aspects of season 1, but overall it just didn't hit me in the same way that the comics did.
Yeah, I think there was not a lot happening in the first season, and they kind of fixed that in this second installment.
Yeah, there's a lot of filler, there's a lot of family drama in season 1.
Well, I mean, it's a story about abuse.
Sure. No, I mean, it's valid. Some of the stuff they were exploring I was not crazy about. There's like a love story of Space Boy and what's her name?
The two not sibling.
Yes, it's very uncomfortable. It's very gross. And
it's
very
the weirdest trope ever.
It's super unnecessary. It's like they're trying to cash in on the creepiest aspects of Game of Thrones.
How close to incest can we get before...
It was... Yeah, it just... The whole thing, it just rang very strange to me. And nothing I was interested in seeing fleshed out. I sound like I'm really down on season 1. They were taking big swings in season 1.
Yeah.
And it just not everything landed. The things that did, I enjoyed quite a bit.
Yeah, I think they course corrected a lot in the second season, so
2.
maybe you would like it.
I'm planning to check it out. It's just at the long end of a very long list, kind of.
Okay. Are you watching anything right now?
Yeah, I finally started a show called Devs.
Devs?
Yeah, it was an FX show. It may have been FX, produced it straight to Hulu, whatever deal they have going on.
Okay.
It's been around for a few months. I'm just now getting to it. Nick Offerman is in it. He's probably the biggest name that I've seen so far. It's about a sort of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's sort of like speculative science fiction.
I think I saw trailers
about a
for
tech
it.
company that's doing some shady things with like predicting the future and seeing the past and the multiverse. And it's written and directed by Alex Garland, who did the movies Ex Machina and Annihilation.
That's some like experimental sci-fi right there.
It's very existential kind of stuff, right? And those two movies I'm a big fan of. So I'm enjoying it so far, but it's a very strange show, and it's hard to kind of keep my finger on exactly what is going on. But both of those movies, especially Annihilation, I felt the same way. It's hard to pin that movie down until you get to the end. But then it also kind of is hard to pin down later when you're trying to explain it to people. It's
Interesting.
I really enjoy them for the aspect of them being sci-fi that only kind of makes sense as you're watching it.
Yeah.
Primer. You watched Primer with me, right?
I did, but as
Same
you
thing.
said, it's hard to...
Right. I have such a hard time getting my head around that movie, and that's why I enjoy Primer. It's a complete failure as a movie because it's so hard to understand that it's not communicating clearly, but I love it as a thought experiment kind of piece of media.
I think that's kind of a cool thing for movies to do.
I think so. I think it's challenged. I'd like to be challenged.
Yeah.
Not by everything, but sometimes if I'm in the mood for it, I enjoy putting on something that's a little heady and makes me kind of second guess either a point of view that I have or a belief that I held or just the nature of reality as it's being presented in a science fiction movie.
Yeah, deep thought.
Deep Thoughts.
That kind of thing.
By Jack Handy. But yeah, that's about all I've had the time to sit down and watch, as far as TV shows.
Okay.
And just the movie that we watched for today.
Which is True Grit.
Yes.
So you picked this movie. Do you want to talk about why?
I do. I did pick this movie. This is the 2010 version. It stars Haley Steinfeld, Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, Josh Brolin, and Barry Pepper. Written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen, and based on the novel by Charles Portis. I enjoy Westerns a lot, and I wanted to bring a Western. I knew I was, this probably isn't the only Western that I'll bring to the table here.
Yeah, you enjoy Westerns.
I do. And I enjoy this one in particular because it is I also, the other thing I have been thinking about since we started this is what Coen Brothers movie should I bring to the table? Because I'm a big fan of the Coen Brothers as well.
It's funny because I hear that name so much that I know who they are, but I haven't actually seen a movie by them until now. I don't think so.
Yeah, you saw Inside Llewyn Davis with me.
I did.
You did a couple years ago. It's about the folk singer in New York.
Okay.
That's probably my favorite Coen Brothers movie. It's right up there. That, Miller's Crossing, Raising Arizona, The Big Lebowski. Some of these I'm sure you've heard of, probably if not seen.
I've seen Raising Arizona.
Have you seen Raising Arizona?
Yeah, I remember you showing... That one stuck with me because it was so weird.
It's such a great movie. I love it. It's Nicolas Cage. I mean, very early Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, he kidnaps a baby, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a childless couple who steals a baby. It's very quirky, very bizarre, absurd comedy. And that's the kind of thing the Coen Brothers do so well is character. Making just very unique characters, even in something like True Grit, which is based on a very traditional kind of Western novel. And this is a big reason that I picked this, not just the Coen pedigree, but I think this movie is a great mix of like old classic Westerns. John Wayne made a version of this movie back in the 60s.
Okay.
This very classic, white hat, black hat, not literally, but
Yeah.
very kind of cut and dry Western. And then you have sort of the new school Westerns from, I'd say, like the 90s on, where they started sort of showing the West and the Western hero as sort of a little more complex than that, and wanting to explore that and make the characters more complex. And I feel like this is sort of, there's a very old school like Western adventure aspect to this movie, but also like some very like deep character work in these.
So it's kind of a mix of both worlds.
It's a mix of both worlds. I've always loved Westerns, the old spaghetti Westerns, the Clint Eastwood. I watched a lot of John Wayne movies growing up, but when sort of like Unforgiven came out in the 90s and sort of kind of redefined what Westerns were, I've enjoyed modern Westerns a lot more, probably. But this is I think that just the perfect mix of both of those things. What makes both of those things really click with me.
Okay, can I ask if that has anything to do with the two very different cowboys in this movie? Because I've noticed that I'm bad with names, so you're gonna have to help me out here. But the blonde cowboy,
LaBeef, played by Matt Damon. Okay. Jason Bourne.
Yeah. Him and the sheriff. Was he a sheriff?
Marshall. Rooster Cogburn. Right.
Rooster. They seem like two different styles of a hero, basically.
Sure. I hadn't lined that up, but one is younger, one is older. It is sort of old school versus new school.
They're kind of fighting throughout the whole movie.
They're rivals through the entire thing for sure. And Mattie is sort of caught in between them. And she bets on Rooster through the whole thing, and I it's so emotional at the end when she goes, I picked the wrong one. She's like, you're really, and she does and she doesn't, but she's very torn and she's very let down at that point. And I think all of it really works. Both of them play off each other, and I think that leads to a deeper character study in this movie. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm following.
I think they really get into some good character work, and I don't want to get into that now when we're just going over the broad strokes of it. But
yeah, I wanted, since you mentioned that this is a Western, I wanted to bring up that I noticed when watching this movie that it handles nostalgia in a very different way than most modern movies handle it. If we take our stereotypical idea of the 50s, it's like this bright diner and everyone's roller skating everywhere. And we kind of ignore the bad stuff from that time period.
Right.
With Westerns, it's almost the exact opposite. It's all about how horrible it was to live in this time and the hardships that people went through.
I think that's a very new Western. That's what I'm talking about with the more modern Western takes a more honest look at what the West was. And it's still kind of mythic. You know what I mean? It wasn't all gunslingers and stuff like that, but it is. They're not shy about showing you there was a lot of racism that existed here. There's a lot of it's just dirty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
you want to. I didn't see this movie and be like, oh, I want to live in that time period.
Right. And I think that's what the more modern era of Western has done, is sort of take the piss out of the cowboy myth that they're these sort of noble gunslingers. And you still have the Magnificent Seven remake from a couple years ago with Denzel Washington. That was sort of very much like a classic Western. They were very much trying to make this heroic cowboy figure all in unapologetic fun. You know what I mean? They're not trying to do any sort of that movie knew exactly what it was doing. And in that way, it's sort of paying tribute to old Westerns, which are still a lot of them very good. You just have to keep in mind when they were made a lot of times.
Yeah, I think that's with everything. You have to...
Sure. The original True Grit I've not seen since I was a kid. I've seen bits and pieces of it since then. And I remember liking that movie when I was a kid. But it's a very high adventure movie, and I remember it being a very simplified kind of version of this story.
All right. Since you've seen part of that and you've read the book and you've seen this movie, which one's your favorite?
This one, for sure.
Okay.
The Coen Brothers remake. It, I believe, does follow the book closer, especially the very end, sort of the epilogue to this movie. But I do remember when this movie came out, I saw it in the theater. I really liked it. And I saw somebody talking about, like, oh, the sacrilege of someone online was talking about, like, it's sacrilege to recast something that John Wayne played. And I was, I stepped up. I'm like, okay, first of all, like, John Wayne was many things and he symbolized many things. And, that's not even getting into, like, personally what John Wayne was about. Because that's been spoken about. We all know John Wayne's views were very much of his time and don't translate well to today.
A lot of old actors.
Right.
And current actors.
It does not translate well to today or anywhere in its time outside of the white male community.
Yes.
But he sort of symbolized something. And John Wayne did have some good performances, but John Wayne was never what I would call, like, a great actor.
Well, also, like, isn't this remake 30, 40 years later? Like...
What, this?
Yeah.
Late 60s is when his was made.
It's a little ridiculous to be crying about a remake of a movie.
It's not even... I don't even think this is a remake of that movie. This is just, like, another adaptation of a book. It would be like calling the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings a remake of the Ralph Bakshi cartoon in the 70s. They're just adaptations of the same story, but they're miles apart. And whatever this newest Lord of the Rings thing is going to be completely different from... It's not a remake of the Peter Jackson movies. It's another adaptation. It's
just branching off of the original work.
Right. It's somebody else's interpretation of the source material. But yeah, it was. It's like, this performance is so much better. I think part of the reason I like modern Westerns is because movie photography has come so far. This movie is gorgeous.
It's really good.
It's amazing to look at. So I just think there's so much in this movie that makes it so much better than the original John Wayne. And I know that's sacrilege to some old school Western fans, but it's where I stand on this movie. I think Jeff Bridges is so much better as a complex Rooster Cogburn than John Wayne's sort of monotone, flat interpretation of the character.
Yeah, I don't have much room to compare.
Sure.
Because I've only seen this version, but...
It's worth taking a look at, even if you don't watch the whole thing, but just to get sort of a sense of the difference. If you're into this movie...
Yeah.
If you want a basis for comparison, I really do. I would recommend reading the book ahead of seeing the other movie. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Like, the book is really solid.
Yeah, I think Rooster's really charismatic in this, though.
For sure.
Like, he's a jerk, but he has such joy in being a jerk.
I want to get into this. I want to take a break first, but I have a lot to say about Rooster and the complexity of being a jerk and a hero at the same time.
Okay, we'll put a pin in it.
Let's put a pin in that, and let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back with a little bit deeper discussion.
All right.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mouse.
I'm Weens.
And we are two sisters with the Mouse and Weens podcast.
Nice and clear.
Come take a listen.
It's fun.
We talk about life, love, and pubic hair.
Sick.
And all sorts of fun family memories and
stuff.
Yeah,
come on.
Stuff. We're on all the platforms, and we hope you take a listen.
Bye.
Bye.
Suck it.
All right, we're back.
Yep.
Good break.
I had a lot of fun.
It was I couldn't believe that surprise party got thrown
I
right in
whoa,
the middle
whoa,
of our show.
whoa. We can't tell the audience.
Well, I mean, it was our surprise.
Okay.
I mean,
Right.
they rolled the cake in. There was gifts.
It was incredible.
I almost forgot to do the second half of the show.
We could have left it at that.
We could have left it at that. Before we get into Rooster, I want to get into the cast and the comic book connections, comic book movie connections.
How is that? I don't see how this relates to comic books.
Most of the cast has been in a comic book movie. All of them? Yes, all of them Marvel.
Interesting. Okay.
All right, Haley Steinfeld. Do you know what movie she was in?
I don't. Ant-Man?
No, she was the voice of Gwen Stacy in Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, wow.
She's also, I think, in that new Bumblebee movie, which kind of counts as a comic book movie.
Not Marvel, though.
Not Marvel, no.
Okay.
Jeff Bridges, Rooster Cogburn. Do you recognize him from anything?
Thanos.
He's not Thanos, but
No?
Thanos is in this movie.
Okay. Oh, that's the
Josh Brolin.
the guy they're hunting.
Yeah, Josh Brolin, who plays Tom Chaney,
Right.
is Thanos, and he's also Cable in the second Deadpool movie.
He really just loves playing villains that kill people's dads.
He wanted to kill half the people in this movie.
Half of the dads.
But Jeff Bridges was in the first Iron Man movie. He's the bad guy.
He's the mentor, right?
Right.
To Tony Stark?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember his name in the movie, but the bald guy.
I really like
yeah.
him in that movie.
Yeah,
He's kind of the star of that.
He knows what he's doing. He's like over the top in just the right way.
He built this with a box of scraps.
He knows exactly what he's doing. Matt Damon, who played LaBeef. You remember?
I don't remember him being in a Marvel movie.
He's in Ragnarok. He's in the...
he's in the play
he's
that
in the play.
Loki sets.
Right. He's in the fake Thor play.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And then Josh Brolin. And one more is J.K. Simmons is in this movie.
I noticed that. His voice is kind of distinct.
His voice, yep. He's Lawyer Daggett. He's just a voiceover in this movie. He works with the Coens a lot now.
Okay.
So they gave him a role in this movie as the Lawyer Daggett in A Letter. And he's J. Jonah Jameson in the first three in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man.
Of course.
So,
That's...
just as I was watching it, I'm like, there's a lot of MCU connections in this.
It's kind of cool. They did a reunion before even
Yeah.
being in those movies.
None of them in the same movie, but just spread all,
It's a cinematic universe, Dad.
I'm sorry. I know.
They're all connected.
The only other two big names that I saw in here were Barry Pepper, who plays Lucky Ned Pepper, looking just disgusting and grungy.
Who were they? The guys in the cabin?
No, Lucky Ned Pepper was like the main bad guy, who is, he's got the sheepskin chaps. And,
yeah.
He's the one who leaves Tom Chaney behind and says, if you hurt that girl, you won't get paid. And, knowing damn well he's going to murder her.
You left her alone with the little girl.
But in the cabin was Domhnall Gleeson. And I've seen this movie half a dozen times and not realized that was Domhnall Gleeson, who is Admiral Hux from the new Star Wars movies.
Okay.
He's also in Ex Machina. He's in an episode of Black Mirror. He's around. He's the guy you see just pop up in everything. He's in that Tom Cruise movie American Made from a couple years ago.
Hey, this isn't ringing any bells, but maybe if I saw him.
If you saw him, he's the guy who gets his fingers cut off in
this movie.
In this movie,
yeah,
in the cabin, yeah. But I didn't realize that was him until this viewing, and I'm like, oh my god!
And how many times have you seen?
I've probably seen this half a dozen times.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the cast and some pretty weird connections to that. But let's jump into talking about Rooster Cogburn. I put in the show notes. Rooster is neat.
No, he's a problematic fave.
A problematic fave. Is that what they call it on...
That's what the teens would call
it. Is that
it.
what the kids are calling it these days?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Name some other problematic faves.
People like the Joker or
Okay.
Bellatrix in Harry Potter. Just sort of people you like to watch be bad.
Okay, but the Joker and Bellatrix are straight up villains.
Yeah, and Rooster isn't.
Rooster is the hero. I would put Rooster more. Would you put James Bond in the problematic fave category?
I guess he would fit. He does good, but he's a misogynist and
Right. That's what I'm talking about Rooster is probably a murderer. Like, we see him
definitely a murderer.
We first meet him, he's drunk and taking a dump in the outhouse. But we first see him on trial trying to justify these people that he killed.
Yeah.
And it looks more and more as the trial goes on that he probably just rode up and shot these men and called it a day. And that's sort of his reputation, is that he basically doesn't take many people alive.
And we see him get away with it.
Right. He walks out. They never say, if they're deciding on this or whatever, but like it is there just to establish that like he has this reputation as someone who just essentially shoots people.
Yeah.
He lines up to shoot the Ned Pepper gang when they sit up outside the cabin waiting for them with a rifle, and he goes, "I'll shoot the last man in." And Mattie says, "You're gonna shoot him in the back?" And he's like, "Yeah. That's just kind of how I do it,
It's the easiest way.
He does kind of imply it's the easiest way, and he sort of justifies it in saying, like, it lets them know we're serious and we mean business. And it's just sort of like, he kind of just shrugs it off, but it is like, you are murdering people.
Yeah.
He is revealed that he is a Confederate soldier, and a very kind of problematic Confederate soldier, in that he rode with the Quantrill unit, who were essentially guerrilla warriors in a very famous or infamous troop of Confederate soldiers who were just murdering guerrillas, essentially.
Wow, I didn't know that part.
Yeah, Matt Damon's character calls him out on that.
I recognized that, but I was like, I didn't know the history behind.
Right, that is who the Frank and Jesse James rode with. It was they were just sort of like this light, unaccountable group. It's kind of like what Blackwater ended up being in the Gulf War, almost.
Interesting.
So he's a murderer. He is a Confederate soldier.
He's not apologetic about the Confederacy thing either.
He's not. But I also kind of put that in the scope of, like, this movie takes place while the country was still healing. There was a lot of still bad blood in the country.
It's of its time.
It is. They are characters of their time. A lot of Civil War veterans on either side never got over that. You know what I mean? And a lot of them, I'm not apologizing for the Confederacy or anything. I think a lot of Confederate soldiers were just fighting for the state that was their home. You know what I mean? In the same way, we have soldiers who go and fight in wars that we don't know why why we're involved in today.
Yeah. You fight with your homeland,
it's a very complex movie in this moment in time to have a hero who was a Confederate soldier.
Yeah.
But I think that makes for a very complex kind of character. He's also he talks about he's twice divorced. He does have a kid that he doesn't see. He's a neglectful husband and father. He's just an all around not a great person up close.
Yeah, he kind of hints at all of these shady things in his past.
Right. He was an outlaw. He does admit that he robbed a bank. He robbed something.
Yeah. He mentioned a bank.
Yeah,
and that the hanging body that he thought he might know.
Right. Yeah, he keeps some weird company. he knows a lot of outlaws. He's been an outlaw. I think the book gets in a little bit more about, he's done a lot of shady outlaw stuff before he became a marshal. And then I think after he was done being a marshal, he, went back with the Wild West show and met up with his Confederate buddies again.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's it.
What was that? Who was at the end?
Yeah, Coulter and Frank James were the two at the end.
Okay.
Because they were sort of famous outlaws by then. They got hired on by, like, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. There's a lot of actual, like, history here.
So this is really tied into, like, a bunch of real people.
Yeah, you've heard of Frank and Jesse James.
I know the names.
And those two were in the James gang, and one of them, I think Frank James, never went to prison, and the other one did go to prison for like 25 years. So then he got hired on by the Wild West show, but there was a lot of weird stuff about he's not supposed to profit from being famous for doing a crime, and it's all just very strange. But
it's a weird time.
I also like that Rooster is heroic. He's, at the end of the movie when he's running with her, trying to, she's been bit by the snake, and he runs that horse to death, and then he picks her up and this fat old man
keeps going
that we've seen struggle just getting around. Keep in mind he's been awake for 48 hours and drunk and hungover and through the longest days of his life, and you see him really fight to save this girl's life, and you see him all through the movie. We see him and LaBeef are both kind of bragging about who they are. They're very showy.
Really petty about it. And
they lean in on when she's impressed with something. They're like, well, yeah, I got, the Sharps carbine and, this.
Yeah.
But when push comes to shove, they both walk the walk, too. Like, Rooster does charge with the reins in his mouth and 2 pistols, and he's running down 4 guys at the end. And LaBeef does make that huge rifle shot at the end. These guys are capable.
Yeah, and I think the way I stand with it is that Rooster is the hero of this story, but he's not a heroic person.
Right.
He's, in this narrative, he's the hero, but outside of it, he's not necessarily
He's
a
not
good
necessarily the most ethical person, but, and this is the thing, the talk is all the time, more and more, because it is a big franchise, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps getting more and more pushback, is the James Bond franchise. People like the Bond movies, but they're just like, I don't like that he murders people. I don't like that he's a womanizer. I don't like that he's not respectful to women. And it's sort of like, the whole point of James Bond is, he is a jerk. But that these are you need somebody cold to save the world. It's a stretch. I get it. They're putting a square peg in the round hole of society. But that's kind of the point, is that he doesn't fit in society, which is why he's a tool in this regard. And I feel like Rooster Cogburn is, excuse me, I feel like Rooster Cogburn is similar in the way of, like, ethically he's very gray. But when push comes to shove and you need him to hunt somebody down, you need him to save somebody's life, like, he's very capable of doing that. And he does show that he does do that. He gets over his fight with LaBeef, and they, team up at certain points.
Yeah, he kind of gets over his pride at the end.
He does. Even though he's still like, insulting him constantly, and about how he never shuts up. But no, I do like Rooster at the end of the day. I think it's fun to watch him, and this is the other thing about these kind of characters. I think it's fun to watch them act in ways that we can't, to sort of vicariously go, I'm not that person. I'm not a murdering psychopath. I'm not a just a constant jerk to people. I don't use people. But sometimes it's sort of fun to watch somebody else do it where there's no consequence.
Well, isn't that's all what movies are, pretty much.
That's exactly right. But I think more and more people are like, no, we want our heroes to behave the way we want them to behave. And I'm like, no, it's more fun to watch them. Like, we all love Batman because he just beats the crap out of everybody.
I want wish fulfillment out of my stuff.
Kind of it, yeah. Especially, and I think that's sort of the old school Western part of this movie too, is that there's this guy who's just rough and tough, and he doesn't take no shit from anybody, and he just shoots every problem that he has. Like, that's a very old school thing, but they wrap it up in this character who's, I think, very complex.
I agree.
I think Mattie really doesn't like that Confederate shit either, because she has him taken out of the Confederate cemetery when she's older, after he dies, and moved to her family plot.
I remember that.
And I think part of that is because she does consider him family, but I think the other part is like, no, he does not belong in a Confederate cemetery. That's disgraceful.
Yeah, I think even though she ends up taking his side, she doesn't see him as a perfect person.
Exactly right. And I think that speaks a lot to how much she's another one of these characters who will never say it, how much she really loves him, because she sees all his faults, but she also she's able to balance it against who she knows him to be and who he shows the world that he is.
Yeah, everyone's a more complex person.
Exactly right. It also helps that there's no Twitter in the Old West, so everybody doesn't get boiled down to their 140 character public self.
That's very true. I don't think I'd want to follow Rooster on Twitter.
No, Rooster would be very problematic on Twitter.
Vote for Trump.
There's this new guy in New York City. His name's Drump or something like that. I don't know. I like him, though.
Reminds me of my Confederate friends.
You want to talk about Mattie?
Yeah. I think that's kind of in the same vein as complex characters.
Would you say that she is the main character of this story?
I think so.
I think so as well. It's a first-person story. She does narrate parts of this.
We're seeing it through her eyes.
We're seeing it through her eyes. But we're also seeing it through, I think, the way the Coens want you to see Mattie. I think there's this balance between, when we see it through Mattie's eyes, she is very capable and very mature and going out into this world, and she's ready for it. And the Coens will turn around and show you Mattie as she really is, and how unprepared she is, and how in over her head she is.
Can you give me some examples of that?
Okay, she is, when she goes in with the horse trader.
Yeah.
She goes in, and I mean, they show there that she's very capable of negotiating and being a really dogged, almost extortion levels.
Yeah, she can hold her own with an adult.
Right, she's able to do business and things like that. And she, talks a good game about, I've been on a coon hunt. I know what it's like to sleep outdoors, and I'll be fine, and I'm coming with, and I'm going to get this guy, and he's going to hang for killing my dad, and this, all of this. She's very matter-of-fact and talks very tough. And then the Coens are showing you that at the end of the day, she's just a little kid. She's 13, 14?
14, I think.
When she buys her horse and gets on it, and the stable boy is like, he doesn't know that you're on there. You're too small.
Yeah.
She's like,
that was kind of a reminder that she's
small, that she's not even, she has this very spirited horse, and she is probably too small to control that horse very well.
She's not cut out for this life in general.
Right. And then as she's gearing up, and I like the way they do this, she's writing a letter home to her mom explaining that she's going hunting to hunt Tom Chaney, And it's this very spirited, very high adventure. The music is playing. It's this I'm heading out into the Indian nation and I'm gonna go get my man. It's very this great American hero kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And she's putting her dad's clothes on and having to put paper in the hat to make it fit and roll her sleeves up. Everything is big on her. She is a little kid dressing up in adult clothes. She's carrying this enormous cap and ball pistol that it's as big as her arm. I mean,
she's carrying it around in a sack.
She's carrying it in a flour sack. She doesn't even have a holster for it. She's not quite sure how to use it. When she does use it, it knocks her over and screws up the next shot. She's really, really unprepared for this. And they I feel like throughout the movie, they keep showing you just these little glimpses of Mattie getting caught being a little kid in this very adult world. She sees two men like brutally killed right in front of her, and you can tell it horrifies her.
Yeah. There's also when she confronts the killer, her dad's murderer.
Yes.
And at first he's like scared, but then he's like, oh, it's just this little girl.
Right.
And she doesn't really know what to do in this situation.
She pulls the gun out, and he's just, after a minute, he realizes like how ridiculous it is that she has this enormous gun that she clearly can't handle it.
Yeah.
She,
and the 50 troopers that are waiting to get him.
She tells the biggest tale. She doesn't say there's half a dozen guys up the hill having breakfast. They'll be down here to look for me. She goes, no, there's 50 heavily armed men up there waiting to take you in.
She's got a SWAT team waiting.
Right. It's very much a tale a kid would tell. And I appreciate that they show her being a little kid pretending, essentially. Like walking or talking the talk, but really unable to walk the walk. But they do that without making her seem like a little kid. Like, she keeps up with them. And even Matt Damon says, he's like, you've earned your spurs. He's like, you really did well out here.
Yeah, I think the only time it wasn't done, like, it made me cringe a little bit when they were arguing over the campfire, and she was like, does anyone want to tell a story?
That was hilarious.
It was funny, but it was like, it really showed her age in a way that me as a young person, I was like, don't say that in front of the adults. They're not taking you seriously.
But she is, and she's not a young adult even. I mean, I guess for the time, she probably is nearing adulthood.
She's marrying age.
Oh, just about, yeah. In Arkansas, yeah. But she, she's trying to break the tension with a fun ghost story. And she thinks they're all going to be pals around the campfire telling a ghost story. And I just think it's funny. And I think part of the reason I think it's funny is because it is one of those glimpses of, oh, she's a little kid.
Yeah, she reminds us that she's naive.
Right. And that she's in over her head.
Yeah. Can we talk about the end with her?
Please.
Because I noticed...
you talking about when she's an adult? Or...
Well, the whole epilogue, really.
Okay.
Because she shoots the man that murdered her father out of revenge and immediately falls backwards into a dark pit full of snakes and loses an arm. Like, it's just... That's clearly a metaphor for, like, how she shouldn't be seeking revenge, right? Or am I just looking at that as, like, symbolism where there isn't any?
I think it... I haven't really looked at that, but, I mean, yeah, the idea that revenge is... I think... I feel like that got settled ahead of that when LaBeef is leaving. After Rooster says, I'm done. The trail's cold, I'm done. And LaBeef is getting ready to leave, and she goes, I want to come with you. And he says, no, have Rooster take you back. And she's basically saying, I chose the wrong man. And I think what she's saying there is, I chose revenge when I should have just chose justice.
All right.
She was being picky about, she wanted revenge. She wanted to go with Rooster and for Cheney to be punished for killing her father.
Not in Texas.
Not for killing the senator. When the end result is the same, justice finds whatever. Justice. Yeah. The idea that justice would catch up to it, whether it was for this crime or this crime, she was wanting her cake and eating it too. And I feel like when she tells LaBeef, have your cake and eat it too is probably not the right metaphor or cliche for that.
I know what you mean, though.
She tells LaBeef that I should have chose you, meaning I should have just come out here with you or paid you or helped you and known that justice was going to find Tom Cheney instead of insisting on it being my personal revenge.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is kind of settled there. But yeah, there is something to be said. I think I put the falling in the pit thing as, again, over her head. She accomplishes her goal. She hangs in. She hangs in with these two lawmen.
She does do it. She kills who she's after.
She accomplishes her goal, but she's not cut out for any of it. She falls down and wakes up the biggest pit of snakes I've ever... Oh my God, it just is so...
It's creepy.
It's very creepy, yeah.
I just liked the idea that there was immediate repercussions for what she did.
Sure. I mean, It is sort of like, the road to hell is, there probably is a metaphor about falling down in a pit and it's full of snakes and you're punished. You're punished for taking vengeance on somebody.
Yeah. Doesn't she mention, there's a Bible story where she's like, I feel like Ezekiel
in the Valley of the Dry Bones.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was after she slept in the Undertaker's.
Right, with the dead bodies.
He was like, you may sleep in a coffin if you like that Undertaker who's just like so devoid of emotion.
One of those Coen brother characters that you were talking about.
That's what the Coens do so well, is just put these moments that are like darkly, literal gallows humor is in this movie when they show the hanging and the three men being hanged.
They cut off the Indian man.
We can talk about that. This movie is full of anti-Native American racism. Not from the Coen brothers. The Coen brothers aren't. They're portraying that in this place that was sort of bordering Indian country at the time. There was a lot of anti-Indian, anti-Native American racism.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting. That's another aspect of Rooster. He kicks those Indian kids off the porch at the store.
Yeah.
Just out of pure meanness, And I always took that as like him being racist against Indians.
Yeah, I thought at first it was because they were being mean to the horse.
I think that was part of it too. But I feel like, but then he comes out at the end and they're just sitting on the porch and he kicks them off. He kicks them off of the porch again, and it's there. Yeah, the idea that there was just this open racism towards Native Americans at that time. And that the Coens were like, we're not going to shy away from that. I don't remember if there was any of that in the original John Wayne True Grit. But you can definitely go back and see a John Wayne movie like The Searchers, which is not just portraying racism. That movie is pretty problematic in their portrayal of Native Americans as well.
I think one of my problems with Westerns in general... and this is probably more the old Westerns. I think they might have...
I think they're doing much
changed
better.
it,
Right,
yeah. But it's not that Native Americans are just, like, portrayed badly. They're the villains. They're typically who the cowboys are up against.
Not-
Unless it's other cowboys, but it's always like Indian territory, like they're
Sure.
fighting them.
Well, I mean, there was a happening when the government was coming in and essentially murdering, but
Yeah.
it's,
But the idea that it's portrayed as Native Americans are
Sure.
the people who are in the wrong there, like
Right.
that rubs me the wrong way, and it's
that,
part
oh,
of
we're
the
going
propaganda.
We're going through Indian country and be careful, it's dangerous here. These people are savages. It's like, well, they're also defending land that you're stealing from them,
Yeah.
and very distrustful of the white man. Sure. I think Westerns have gotten a lot better at that. I think there's still, with any minority, there's always stereotypes to be mindful of. I think they're doing much better in the last 10, 15 years. But even movies that had Native American characters that were heroes, there's always some weird stereotypical stuff. There was noble savage kind of cliches that were put
Yeah.
in there.
Pocahontas, just in general.
Yeah, I'm not going down that Disney rabbit hole.
Yeah, different time.
That movie could have portrayed Native Americans perfectly, and it was still a garbage movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like that they didn't shy away from that. That they were hanging three men. They let the two white men talk. Both of them were their own way of funny, and then the Native Americans start speaking. They just put the hood over him and pull the lever, and it's just so out of the blue. I laugh every time, and it's also
sad, but it's hilarious.
It's so abrupt, it's so unexpected that it catches you by surprise and makes you laugh, and then it makes you gasp, and it makes you also feel terrible for laughing.
Yeah, it makes you laugh, and then it goes, "Why'd you
Why
laugh?
are you laughing at that? You're a terrible person.
Jesus, get out of my theater, man."
It's, but yeah, it's a really interesting progression of Westerns in their portrayal of Native American people and minorities in general, non-white
Yeah.
minorities. There's some that are trying to balance the scales by just I'll bring up like the Magnificent Seven remake. Here's the new Magnificent Seven. It's led by Denzel Washington, who's black.
Yeah.
There's a Native American character in there. There's a Chinese character in there. All this diversity, which is what everybody is clamoring for in movies. That's great.
For sure.
It's great. We got a diverse Magnificent Seven. Nobody, I think, in that entire movie ever calls out that Denzel is black.
Really?
And it's like, okay, I understand we're trying to say this is no big deal. We're in a period piece, post-Civil War, with a black man leading a group of white men. Also, there's a Chinese guy and a Native American guy. And you're telling me nobody is bringing this up at all. Nobody they meet, nobody in the towns they go to, nobody on the, Western Avengers or whatever we want to call the assembled team. Like, nobody's bringing this up. Like the movie can bring it up and still say it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But things like that where it's a period piece and they try to act like race isn't an issue, and it's like, no, at this time, race would have been a huge issue for a lot of people, and I'm not saying it has to get ugly and we have to hear the N-word every 6 lines, but it's got to get brought up at least once, right? Like,
yeah, that's failed
as a
diversity.
conflict. Right, yes. That it becomes, I don't want to say tokenism, because
It's kind of
Denzel works with that director a lot, but you just want to see it portrayed. Like, let's not pretend like America wasn't openly, insanely racist at this time.
Yeah, you can't create this cultural this cultural like heaven of
Right.
mixed cultures in a movie where they wouldn't have coexisted.
It pretends these problems never existed, and I think that's more problematic than actually showing these things.
Yeah.
Not to show these things as a positive. It's like this movie. It shows racism towards Native Americans, and it shows it not in a good way. Despite laughing at, this terrible, putting the hood over him, like, you still recognize this as like, oh, this was horrible.
Yeah.
That's just what the Coens do.
And they also show, there's a few other points in the movie, like, when the Indian man shows up when they cut the dead body down,
Right.
and he wants the body to trade for later on.
Right.
There's a bit of a standoff, but then they show that he's peaceful and they go on their own way.
There's just a moment of tension. I'm gonna say there probably would have been in Indian territory at the time. Things were probably not entirely peaceful, not because Indians are savage and violent, but just because there was, years of conflict between.
It's a
white
tense
men.
turf war.
Yes, and to have the native nation, whatever's left of it, after white men have taken everything else, and then have white men coming through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you didn't take enough.
It's an insult to injury.
I would think that meeting in the woods like that could be a little bit tense, but yeah, I don't know for sure. I don't know all the history of that particular region, but yeah, it's a really interesting way to show some of the problems in our history.
Yeah, I think so.
You got anything else? We talked about cinematography. I think this movie is gorgeous. Just
I would say
the
so.
landscape shots.
Yeah, or the close-ups.
This was Roger Deakins. Yeah, Roger Deakins was the director of photography on this. And
Okay.
He's done, I think, most of the Coen brothers.
So, he works close with them.
I think they kind of ramped up their careers at the same time. But he's done 007 movies. He's done big movies for years. I mean, it's beautiful. There's beautiful shots all through this movie.
Yeah, it really struck me in the dark shots, especially there's a shot where they're looking through a train tunnel, and you see the
mine.
The daylight,
Yeah.
the daylight behind him, and it's just so striking.
I'm drawing a scene from this movie. And I really had a hard time deciding. The mine, Rooster looking into the mine, was a big contender, but I had a hard time picking one.
Which one did you pick?
I picked Mattie holding the giant gun. In the
that's
river.
good.
It is a good shot, and as interesting as Rooster is to draw, I love Mattie. I love Haley Steinfeld in this movie. I think she's an incredible actress. I don't know how old she was when she did this. She could have been much more than 14. But
Yeah, she looks the age for the part.
Right. Some of those actors really look young, though, in their
That's
a few years
true,
older.
yeah.
But she really is good, and she really does hold her own against... I mean, she's in scenes with Matt Damon and Jeff Bridges, who are seasoned actors and really good, and she holds her own through this whole movie.
I think she is the movie.
She really... I mean, yeah, like we said, it's told from her point of view.
Yeah, and she just... Most of the importance of the scene is placed on her.
Right. She owns that character, She does very well with Coen written dialogue.
Yeah.
You
it's very sassy.
She's great. So, I ended up wanting to draw something with her in it, and that was what I picked. And
I think that's a good choice.
Trying to show her in those clothes that are too big for her, and the big hat and the big gun, and still, she in that shot she looks very much like a child. Her face is afraid.
Yeah. She looks like she's in like a Halloween costume of a cowboy.
Kind of, yeah. She literally is wearing her father's clothes.
Yeah.
Like she just stumbled into his closet and picked out some clothes and is playing dress up. But,
Some pretty overt imagery.
yeah, it's good stuff. The score is the other thing I wanted to touch on. I
didn't notice it much in this movie.
I'm not a big movie score guy. A lot of times I just don't pay attention to it, but if I do notice it, it's because it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think this one was Carter Burwell did the score for this, and I know he's worked with the Coens before. I know he did the Miller's Crossing score, and probably a couple others without looking up his filmography. I know he did Miller's Crossing off the bat because I have some of that one. But yeah, it's a really sort of it sounds very old Hollywood adventure kind of Western. It sounds a little bit like Randy Newman's score from The Natural. It's very, very old-timey kind of adventure. Let's go out into the great unknown kind of very Americana kind of.
This movie felt, it sounded like what I felt a Western is.
Right. I think it's very reminiscent of old school adventure stories like that. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed it a lot, and it actually, this score actually, as I'm watching the movie, I think combined with the cinematography and some of the parts of the story that are happening at the time, this score chokes me up. This score really gets me emotional. And I can't say that about a whole lot of movie scores. So
I'll have to go back because I was kind of more focused on the plot this time around. It's been like almost 10 years probably since I've seen this movie.
I think that's part of what works about the score is that it just merges with the story so well. Like it ramps up as she's, there's a beautiful shot of her busting out of the barn and riding off to go find Rooster.
Yeah. And
the score is ramping up, and her voiceover, she's like, I'm heading out to the Choctaw Nation to find Tom Chaney, and this big call to adventure. It's very emotional. It's very, very beautiful. And all those elements work together perfectly. It's just a perfect synchronicity moment.
It all layers together to create.
I think it's just I think all the elements of this movie work for me. This is, if I have to pick a favorite Western, it's definitely in the running. Like something like Unforgiven, a couple of the classic spaghetti Westerns, Josie Wales, this Open Range. There's a short list of Westerns that and this is probably in the top 3. I mean, this is
wow.
This every element of this movie just really works for me, and I think it's a great American Western.
I believe it. I haven't seen a lot of Westerns, but
sure.
I think this one was really good, and I think I want to try more now.
I'm glad to hear that. I feel like the Western is a genre that has issues with staying power.
It gets a little tiring.
Right.
I feel like
a lot of people have made comparisons to like the Marvel movies, superhero movies, comic book movies.
Yeah.
They're genre movies, and they're overproduced, and everybody makes a ton of them. And we're at a point now where there's far more bad ones than good ones, and that's what Westerns were like 50 years ago, 60 years ago.
I can see that.
Probably more than that. Yeah. 50s was a big Western time. And then like every 20 to 30 years, I feel like they come around again. We get a wave of them. Some are good, some are bad. Some just fall away and are completely forgettable. And then, they kind of come around again. And each time I feel like they evolve a little bit. They get a little bit different. There's a little more style put into them.
I think that's how every genre should be. Yeah. Always evolving. And
I think most of them do. The Westerns, I feel like every time they come back, people are a little less interested, though. I feel like we're almost kind of moving away. They're a period piece, like medieval battle stuff, like fantasy stuff. We get waves of that too, but that's a genre.
Yeah, now it's more urban fantasy.
Yeah, that's true. Harry Potter kind of changed that game, didn't it?
Yeah. Percy Jackson, Twilight, stuff like that.
All those kids' book series, young adult book series, I think brought urban fantasy to the forefront more than Tolkien style. But yeah, I hope Westerns keep evolving and keep coming around, and I kind of hope people start finding them again. I'm just spitballing off the top of my head here, but it does make me wonder if the political correctness of our time makes people less willing to go back and visit a time that will either be whitewashed over the problematic issues of the time or portray problematic issues of the time, and we just don't want to visit that kind of stuff anymore.
That could be it.
I'm not invalidating that viewpoint. I'm just wondering if as a society we are maybe moving past the Western a little bit.
I've always had the viewpoint that Westerns are just a little bit boring. Like, they've got their action, but the rest of it is sort of a slow burn, and that kind of set me off of it as a kid.
It can be. I mean, there's plenty of boring every genre,
Yeah.
But, and I tend to think some of the best Westerns are the ones who do the most character work and the most exploration. I think now we are doing a lot more explorations of, what are the problems that we were facing at the time, and let's incorporate some of that stuff in, and those become kind of think pieces a little bit, and those aren't as exciting as just straight up gunfights all the time.
Yeah, real quick, what was that? There was a Netflix series that was just short stories, basically. There were like 8 or 10 of them.
That was a Coen Brothers thing, the Ballot of Buster Scruggs.
Oh, I didn't realize that they did that.
Yeah, I should have brought that up. That was a Coen Brothers anthology.
I was just gonna say, that sort of reminds me of this movie.
Well, that's why.
It explains it.
There's actually a couple of callbacks to this movie in those stories. One of them is somebody brings up Grandma Turner, who is the woman that Mattie has to share the bed with in the boarding house.
Yeah.
And somebody brings up like the ghost story, The Midnight Caller, which is the ghost story that Mattie wants to tell around the campfire.
That's pretty cool that they call back to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, ooh, cinematic universe, but it's just like, no, we're doing Westerns, and yeah, it very clearly is in the Coen style.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good call. Good call on that one. I could stand to see the Coens do some more Westerns.
Maybe they'll do a part 2 to that. Or
They
just
could.
something else.
They could do another anthology. I would enjoy that a lot. I didn't love everything in Buster Scruggs, but some of those stories I liked a lot. You got anything else on this one, on True Grit, before we close it out?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, we're closing this one out. Do you have a shout out this week?
I do. Real quick, let me pull it up. It's a YouTube channel called Aspect Science.
Aspect Science.
Yeah, it's this guy. He's like a 20-year-old British man, and he makes videos about random science topics.
Like Bill Nye the Science Guy?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
He just explains it down to earth,
Or
like
Mr. Wizard? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like the most random topics you can think of. His most recent video was on growing food on Mars, but then he's also made videos on like the social hierarchy of apes and just random stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's Aspect Science, and that's just something.
That's on YouTube, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. We'll
Yeah.
put that link in the show notes, and I'll put my link in there too. This is a podcast I found in the last week. It is on YouTube as well as your podcatchers. It's called How to Be an Artist, and it is by an artist named Brandon Dayton. I've followed Brandon Dayton for quite a long time. He put out, years and years ago, he put out this small, sort of pocket-sized comic book called The Green Monk. And then he later on went and made a webcomic of a more fleshed out series of the Green Monk. And the Green Monk is this wandering monk who has a magic blade of grass, who fights monsters. And
It sounds kind of cool.
it's very cool. And he's a great artist. And he did a series of YouTube videos, all art related, for a couple of years. And then when his webcomic was getting picked up, I think by Image, he kind of stopped making videos for a while. I think he just got busy with other things, getting his book published and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I just found that he just started coming back with stuff. I think there's been 2 episodes out. I've enjoyed them both a lot. His content, I think, is very common sense about making comics and cartoons and the practical aspects of that, and on all levels, thought process, how to balance your life, these things.
Yeah.
I think he's a very good, if you're into art and into just creative things in general. I think he's a really solid follow, because he's just very plain spoken and very honest about what making things is like, and sort of the good mindsets to have. So that's How to Be an Artist. It's a brand new podcast, and you can find that on any podcatcher or on the YouTube channel of Brandon Dayton. I believe it's just Brandon Dayton on YouTube or podcatchers. So
Okay. That
check
sounds
it out.
cool.
It is very cool. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rood. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. It helps our visibility and helps us grow the show.
Another way to help us grow is to tell a friend. If you know a movie fan or a movie podcast fan, tell them about us, and we've been scientifically proven to be a good movie podcast.
It's true. Science doesn't lie. Austin, do you have any social media handles you want to share?
I do. I'm at austin.n.rood. That's TikTok and Instagram.
TikTok, Instagram. philrood.com takes you to my website. You can get all my social media handles from there. And you can see the blog post I just did today. Yes,
Ooh.
I'm publishing a blog in 2020. That's how cutting edge I am. This was about my NaNoWriMo experience and whether I passed or failed.
Sounds cool.
Austin, you want to read the credits?
Sure, we do everything here.
There you have it. We'll see you next time on The Picture Show.
See ya.